Good.
We're socially distancing.
Okay.
Well, you got cooties.
You're all set? Are we all set?
Good.
Are we live?
Yes.
Okay. So this is a call to order of a special meeting of the Bridgeport Board of Education. Today's date is Wednesday, October 5th, and the time is noted as being 5:31 p.m. Mr. Secretary, would you call the roll?
Erica Castillo,
We can't hear you if you're here.
I'm mute.
I think you're muted.
We're good. All right, Bobby Brown,
Here.
Joseph Sokolovic. Present. John Weldon,
Present.
Joe Lombard. Here. Albert Benahan. Christine Baptiste Perez. Michael Macaron. Sybil Allen.
Okay.
Let me try Erica again. Erica Castillo, are you present? Albert,
Albert's.
Albert taking the roll.
Yeah, I'm here. I was trying to get in, but it not let me. But thank you for that call me.
Okay.
Okay.
So, well, we have 5.
Okay. So I called this meeting because at our last regular board meeting, some decisions were made. And if I recall correctly, Ms. Baptiste Perez wanted to hear some information from council regarding some of the discussion and decisions that were being made related to search committees. And after the decision was made to disband the search committee and operate to solicit a superintendent. Is that?
Erica again.
That's Erica
That's Mike.
Oh, man.
That's Mike.
Macaron.
Mike was here before.
Yeah,
Let me tell him again.
I guess.
Getting kicked out and in, I think.
Okay.
She can't hear anything, it says.
Who?
Erica can't hear anything.
Okay. Can we try to help Erica out before we?
Yeah, Rita's working.
Okay.
Macaron here or not?
Yes.
Yes. Let the record show Mr. Macaron has joined the meeting. We're trying to help Erica Castillo, who's having some technical issues. She's here again. Can you hear us, Erica?
Yeah, I can hear now. Can you hear me?
Okay. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, so I'm going to start over for Albert and Mike, who just joined. So at the last board meeting, a decision was made to disband the search committee and in favor of operating to solicit a superintendent by the full Board of Education. There were at least one, maybe a couple of people who abstained because they weren't certain of the ramifications of this. And I think they wanted the benefit of counsel before they voted one way or the other, but they didn't have that at their disposal, so they abstained. And looking into it further, let's back up. A statement was made that if we operate as the full Board of Education, we can move into and out of executive session as we see fit whenever we need privacy to talk about things. But when I look at the statute related to executive sessions, there are very specific reasons that the board can go into executive session. It does not include reviewing resumes or screening candidates. It only talks about appointing someone as a public official, which I take to mean, we'll clarify with our attorney, to mean that it's only when you kind of get to the point where you're ready to hire someone that you can go into executive session to discuss with that person and then come out in public and finally make the appointment based on the discussion you had. Similar to what we do in the Personnel Committee, we will interview finalist candidates to make a final recommendation for appointment publicly, and we'll do that in executive session. So these I found these to be really problematic, and I also felt that there was a lot of misunderstanding among everyone about what we can and can't do. And I wanted everybody to have an opportunity to have these things explained by our attorney and give everybody the ability to ask him questions as much as they want so that they're comfortable with how all of this really works. So on that note, I'm going to turn everything over to Attorney Dugas. Again, this item is discussion with counsel regarding Connecticut general statutes pertaining to executive sessions and personnel search committees.
Okay, thank you. Let me start by saying that the Freedom of Information Act requires that meetings of the board obviously be in public session. But what it does is it creates several exceptions to that rule. One of the exceptions that you know, and these are sometimes referred to as non-meetings. So when we go in to negotiate, when we go to discuss labor contracts for approval, meet with the union, that's one of the exceptions. Another exception is a meeting of a single political party. And the other exception, or another exception, is for a quote, personnel search committee for an executive level employment candidate. Now, what's important to note is you have this broad policy saying you must be in public. But then the legislature has created several exceptions. And it created those exceptions because in its wisdom, it decided those are things that are important for you to have the right not to discuss in public. So to take the obvious example with the labor negotiations, if you have a strategy, you don't want to be in public discussing your strategy. So they say you don't even have to comply with the Freedom of Information Act. You meet and you do what you have to do. And of course, we bring the contract ultimately to you for approval. The same is true. They've made an exception for an executive search committee where the board appoints itself as the search committee. And so it has made a policy determination at the state legislative level that there are important reasons why you should not have to meet in public to do that. Now, I don't know exactly what they were thinking. I could go back and look at the legislative history, but what I can tell you is that there's some things that come to mind that at a minimum would be problematic if done in open or public session. So let me give you
If I'll just let the record reflect that Ms. Baptiste Perez has entered the meeting.
So let me give you probably the easiest example. You're going to interview 3 prospective superintendents. 2 of them are sitting superintendents in other school districts, and one of them is somebody from your district. The folks from the other district may or may not want their community, their board, to know that they're interviewing, okay? So if you have a non-meeting, it's not posted, the public doesn't know when it is to become, the press, the media, everybody else, you can meet with them in a way that at least minimizes the chance that somebody's going to say, hey, I recognize the superintendent from you pick the town, Stratford, New Canaan, wherever it happens to be from. Now it's all over the paper on the next day. Another potential problem that I see in the process is at some point you're going to want to talk about the resumes, right? If, as Mr. Weldon has pointed out, I don't see how you could go into executive session to have that discussion, okay? You can go into executive session to discuss a particular individual. The problem is under the Freedom of Information Act, you must identify who that person is. And now, so we've run into that problem that I talked about of a sitting superintendent or an assistant superintendent and having to identify them and having that be out there in the public. So, those are the sorts of problematic. I was even trying to think, is there a way around that? I was hard pressed, frankly, to come up with a way around it. So I think that gives you a sense of some of the practical problems you can run into. I'm not going to tell you how to do your business. It's not my job, but I will tell you that the General Assembly, through passage of that exception, has said, we understand there are important reasons why you don't want to have this discussion in the proverbial fishbowl, and that these things should happen in private.
Does anyone have any questions? Mr. Collier?
Okay, now let's go back to the legislator, the initial crafting of the law, putting the wording, shall have the right to, correct?
Well, what it says is that a meeting, so you have a meeting, right? A meeting must be in public, you must post, and it carves out from the definition of meeting a search committee. So it doesn't say.
So the search, what's the
It
language?
says you don't have to comply with the Freedom of Information Act if you appoint yourself as a committee.
Right. Is there any language that says we must appoint ourselves and must not have meetings?
Absolutely not.
Because in the legislator's greatest wisdom, they anticipated cities like Bridgeport, who often do things behind closed doors without any transparency, maybe wanting to have that process in public in order for the public to feel that no wool was pulled over their eyes. Because as we know, our ex-police chief is in prison in the city of Bridgeport. The final 3 finalists of the police chief, it's an open process. And we should not be doing things such doors. And already, by having the personnel search committee, we locked people out of a very, very simple meeting. Its discretion was abused. That's why the board moved in its way. The public was very upset that they couldn't even hear us discussing which search firm to choose.
I would point out that occurred because a couple of board members unilaterally promoted the meeting.
Agreed.
Understood. I'm just saying, but that is what happened. And the reason why we have this committee, that's why we're having this discussion, because if you're going to operate as a search committee, we have to behave even-handedly amongst ourselves and consistently with how the committee is designed to work. Now, at the end of the day, if you want to operate as the full board because you want everybody to see everything, there's nothing that says you can't do that. The problem lies in the fact that you will greatly limit the pool of candidates who will subject themselves to that kind of thing.
Right.
And if you're willing to do that, that's okay. But if you want to try to preserve a quality pool of applicants, it's give and take.
Right. Absolutely. And I understand that point 100%. And I understand that's one of the things that allowed our superintendent to sandbag us after gaining a contract in negotiations without this, I'm speaking, disclosing.
No, I'm very clear. We're not here to talk about the superintendent.
I'm just explaining my rationale why we should do this in public. I am not interested in candidates who are going to flee their district without so much as a word to them or a heads up. I'm not interested in somebody like that being in our district. I'm interested if you have a good relationship with your board, they should want you to achieve and move forward in your career. And if you have a bad relationship with your board, you want to get out of there. And I frankly don't want somebody who starts off their career leaving their former board holding a bag.
I think it's really about early stages of the process. We've talked about this in the past, that when we do get to the point of 2 or 3 finalists, that should start to become in the public arena. And those 2 or 3 finalists should be telling their board, hey, just so you know, I'm being considered for this. It is what it is. And they've got a 1 in 3 or 50-50 chance of getting it. But somebody is going to be really hesitant to have the very early stages of this process and them being a part of it being made public, the fact that you even submitted an application.
And if I may, just add one point, and I believe Mr. Weldon and I had this conversation some time ago. You can designate yourself as the search committee and then choose to have some portion, the final interviews or the final three or whatever you want to do. At the end, there's nothing to say you couldn't open that up at whatever point you decide you want to do that. My apologies, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Mr. Lombard had his hand up and
And then Mr. Benahan also. So can the search committee, so not when we decide to go to full board public, but can the search committee craft itself in such a way that it's semi-public? In other words, could we, identify, post when we're meeting, that we're actually taking this on and not just not meeting for months? Can we post that? Also, could there be any kind of, since there's no minutes, it's like executive session, could there be any kind of quorum requirement to meet? So that it's not just three people getting together, meeting and talking about it, could there be anything like that hybrid type thing?
Remember, at the end of the day,
Right.
you're going to elect, quote unquote, a superintendent. That has to be in public.
Right.
Could you decide to impose upon yourselves as part of this process that there has to be a quorum in order to do something? Yeah, you could do that.
Could, because I feel like part of what Mr. Sakalovic is talking about is a general sense of mistrust and suspicion that just exists in the city. He gave the example of the sheriff and so on and so forth. And I feel like I think most of us from just discussions at meetings like the idea of some sense of confidentiality for the candidates up to a point. I know I do. I've said that openly all along. I think that's important up to a point. I think the last two, maybe three would be a different story. But I also feel like if we, we thought that, after the meeting we just had, we could go into executive session whenever we want. So we had no problem with the idea of keeping the resumes confidential in the conversations we were having. It turns out we can't do that. They'd all be FOIA. So to find a way to satisfy all the concerns that we've been discussing for the last couple of weeks, I think would be helpful. And kind of what you just answered my question, we could impose upon ourselves that we will post that we're meeting.
Yes, you.
But it'd be like executive session, people can't come into the meeting.
Correct.
But post that we are meeting, we are addressing this, and that we would impose that we would have to have quorum, otherwise we wouldn't meet. I mean, I'm not saying these are what we would do, but we can make that a rule of it. Because the thing I'm sensing the most is just a sentiment of mistrust. But I think rationally speaking, at least from my own personal professional experience, even with a good relationship that I have with my employer, the last thing I'd want to do is identify that I was looking for another job. And also, the last thing I want to do is stop working on internal advancement in my current job that I might be leaving. You got to keep things moving. And so it's different to sandbag or something, however that's perceived, but it makes sense to want to keep things moving forward. So for me, I would like to be able to have in such a way that the candidates' applications, including for the interim, for people coming from the retired superintendent pool or from internal through Apple Track, that could be confidential to an extent as well. I think that's common sense to me. Sorry to put anybody down by saying that, but I think that's common sense. So it sounds like there is a way to craft it so it could satisfy concerns.
I believe so.
My question to what you're talking about, if we post when we're going to meet, what do you do when somebody shows up?
Well, kind of like
Show up.
kind of like executive session, they could be here in this room, but if we were going to executive session, they can't go in there. So it would have to be advertised in such a way, just look more, I think more for satisfying the interest in knowing that this is not being dropped. This is being attended to. The full board is being included. Nothing's happening behind the scenes. I think that kind of a thing. I don't know how it would look, but I feel like it's important to keep people informed.
You could also have a standing report on the regular agenda. Anything that's transpired gets reported regularly. We We've placed the advertisement. It's out there in the world now. And then however many weeks later, 20 people applied. That gets publicly reported. Or if we didn't meet, committee has not met. This is the stage that we're at. And when you get to a point where you've got something to report, you report it. But I just feel like it's disingenuous to report that we're going to meet on certain days. And then when people show up, well, you got to stay out there.
Right.
I- Anyway, Ms. Baptiste Perez, and then Albert had his hand up.
I have the statute that you're referring to.
Sure, 1-200, subparagraph 2.
Then my next question is pretty simple, that as a board, we can come up with our own set of rules when it comes to conducting search committee meetings. So we can select the chair for the search committee, determine the quorum for the search committee, things of that nature.
The chair would have to be through your bylaws, but whatever you do for subcommittees, but you can certainly, there's no reason you can't agree, certain certain requirements like the quorum and so forth.
And so moving, in the past, when we did have a search committee meeting and it started without meeting what our regular meeting forms would require, is that not problematic? So if a search committee meeting started with just 3 individuals and it's made up the entire board?
There's nothing prohibiting less than the full board from meeting as part of the executive search committee.
Okay, but without designating particular roles, who's to say that a search committee meeting, including certain individuals, would be the search committee? So when this event happened early last month and the chair and other individuals were in that meeting, arguably so, the search committee is the whole board. There's been no determination of who's going to chair the search committee, and there's no quorum requirement. So you mean, I'm trying to get clarification as to, can you have 2 separate search committees being conducted without actually designating roles and authority in it? Because if 4 board members are in a meeting regarding search, executive search, and another 4 members decide to meet elsewhere for an executive search, doesn't that create chaos in the process?
I don't know if I can speak to that, but what I can say is that the Freedom of Information Act doesn't govern at all how you conduct a search committee if you appoint yourself as the whole committee. Your bylaws, if they're silent on the issue, that would be the next place you'd look. And if there's nothing relevant in the bylaws, you guys can do pretty much whatever you decide to do.
Okay.
That's a good point.
But it's not uncommon, by the way, for a search committee to meet, even though not everybody can meet. I mean, people have busy schedules, that happens. Obviously, from a trust standpoint, you want to, try to be as inclusive as you can.
And the last time the committee met, everybody was available because everybody was in the building.
Ms. Allen wasn't in the building.
Excuse me? Well, Ms. Allen, except for Ms. Allen. She chose not to be there. But everybody else was in the building. Everybody indicated
I recall Ms. Castillo showing up about an hour late.
I don't remember what time she showed up. But
Excuse me, I was 15 minutes late, and
Yeah.
I decided to participate in the meeting because I understood, because I read Connecticut Statute 1-200, that this was not a meeting that was subject to the bylaws. So the meeting was going to happen regardless of whether or not I was present, and I chose to participate in the meeting because as an elected
Okay, thank you,
official,
Ms.
as a board
Castillo.
member,
I have the
it
floor
makes
right
me
now.
Let's
totally
try to be
ineffective.
Ms.
cordial with
Castillo,
each other,
I have the floor
guys.
right now. Thank you for the
right,
clarification
so-
and congratulations on reading. Now, moving back
okay.
to the
Oh, wow,
original
it's rude.
question.
That was highly rude. Can we please be civil? Can we just be 9 people sitting around a table?
Ms. Allen isn't here.
8 people. Thank you for the mathematical correction.
No problem.
Seriously, can we
Okay,
just be
I
people?
want to ask the lawyer questions. That's the purpose.
Go ahead.
Here. He's on a billable hour. Let's run through asking him questions.
Go ahead.
Okay. So you mean if we don't set up rules for our search committee, any members of the board, because it's the entire board, can have an executive search meeting. Just let them know, we want to meet on this day, and if board members can't meet, then so be it. 2 members of an executive search committee meeting.
It's a meeting of the entire committee. Those that can make it, as long as everybody is invited and given fair notice. I mean, that's the way it's supposed to operate. This isn't supposed to be like a gotcha shell game. People should be given notice. You should set a schedule so that people have notice and can plan around it.
But it's not subject to FOIA notice, right? So it doesn't have to
course
be
not.
24 hours.
No. I'm talking about human decency notice, not legal notice. Fairness.
Okay. I'm gonna pass on to Mr. Benningham, who had the next question.
May I?
Yeah.
Oh, one is for the mention from the chair. Thank you. I heard when I was on my way over here, and I'm going back what Mr. Joe Sokoloff said about me searching somebody and making it public. Whoever's going to take that seat, they have to understand, and this is my point of view, what I heard and them understand, that whoever's going to be superintendent, they have to deal with parents, have to deal with students, have to deal with board members, have to deal with unions, have to deal with everyone. For me to be doing something that I know others board member trying to have a private or not let another community, I'm not agree with that 100%. I would never agree, because he's a person that he have to understand, he or she understand how to deal with so many people, how to deal with us, the 9 board members, and especially with the community. So sometimes when they're trying to do something, they hiding or trying to private, the community cannot know. I'm not agree with that. I understand, like you said in the beginning, few information and few stuff we cannot put in public. It's private. It's a policy, it's a protocol, and I respect that. And I know us, the board member, will respect that. But let them know how and when we're going to do the meeting, how we're going to search, to do the forum for the parents, stuff like that. There's some board member that some did not agree. They have to understand that person has to be there and deal with Bridgeport School. Not only with us, they have to deal with almost 21,000 children. So I wanted, because I heard what Mr. Joe Sokoloff said in the beginning, and I heard what I was on my way, that whoever he or she had to deal with so many things have to be ready. This is Bridgeport. We're talking about Bridgeport School. We're talking about one of the state big one have almost 37 schools. And we don't go over the other ones because people say, oh, Milford, oh, Norwalk, oh, Monroe, they have, yeah, but they don't have what we have. Whoever's come had to be ready. This is not a game. We're going through a lot of things. And when we try to get Mr. Testani, we never go through about this because we never think that he's going to do what he did. But pass, good luck for him. But we had to go, I want to be sure and be in the record, and people, us a board member, understand that whoever come had to deal. And we're not going to do secret because our community, they deserve what's going on. They have to deal with a lot of things. And I always say that I'm going to keep it saying, I'm going to keep it saying, and then some board members, they don't like it. We are elected because of the community. So we have to let them know, the community, what we're doing and what we want, and listen to them. But like you said in the beginning, we have policy and protocol that have we respect, and I agree with that. But I don't want things to get hyped because I'm not good with that. I just want to say that. Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Lombard had his hand up.
Yep.
Yeah, I see him all.
So I just want to speak what I think I'm understanding. So with the search committee, we have the ability to craft it and design it almost in any way we want.
Yes.
However, without a search committee, really all we're talking about is all applicants to be public knowledge. It's really what it comes down to. That's really the main thing. Either do we want for every single applicant, we do our RFP, we get our search firm, and they search across the nation, and every one of those people right from the get-go, local and not local, will be public knowledge? Or do we want to hold on to some sense of confidentiality for those candidates and only make public the finalists? So if that's what we want, it sounds to me, if I'm understanding this correctly, that we have to have the search committee. If we want to have everything out in the open and we think that's the better way to go, then there's no need for a search committee. And then again, to repeat what I started with, that if we do decide to have a search committee in order to maintain confidentiality of candidates, we can craft it either with a chair or quorum or notice, however we choose as the board, as we form the committee. Is that accurate, what I just said?
Yeah, that is accurate. The only other thing I would add is it's not even just about the confidentiality of the candidates, but the other piece is for this process to work, you guys need to have candid conversations. And, you know, in any community, not just Bridgeport, but I'd say especially in Bridgeport, you know, there will be a tendency to want to play to constituents. And that will not necessarily foster just an honest conversation necessarily about the candidates and what's best for the children in this community. So
Right, so it also allows us to have those conversations like we would in executive session.
Yes, sir. That's my point.
Right, thank you.
And a lot of this, once we get to the point of having a search firm, they will be the facilitators of all of this.
Absolutely.
So it's not going to be like one person running the committee. Once you get a search firm, they're administering the whole process, and that's the way you want it, because then everybody is backed off it. And they're able to pull everybody together. They're making sure everybody can make the meetings, and they're doing all of that work. So, you know, this notion that, you know, we need to have a chair of the committee, really, it should be a committee, effectively a working group that is facilitated by a search consultant. And we need to be able to, when we get to that point, put ourselves in their hands and let them show us the way to do this. And then we can just be tasked with screening 1, 2, 3, 4, and that's it. This doesn't need to be a very rigidly structured type of thing. So I believe it was Ms. Baptiste Perez, then Joe. Is there anybody online?
Two.
Got a hand up?
Got two up there.
Bobby Brown first.
Okay, since we haven't heard from anybody online, can maybe go to them? So
Bobby had her hand up.
Bobby had her hand up,
Amy Castillo.
and then Ms. Castillo.
Good evening, everyone. I honestly feel the way that Mr. Lombard has explained it makes a whole lot of sense. And I think honestly, throughout this whole entire process, this was the part that was very confusing. Because on one hand, we want to make sure that the community is informed, and on the other hand, like he said, we want to make sure there is confidentiality. But I personally feel like I want to be at a place where at least both of those items are addressed, because I just received a phone call yesterday of a elected official who had no idea what the next process was for the board. And I'm like, well, come to the meeting, you know, be here. And I want to make sure that if these conversations are being had and other, you know, areas that we as board members can be able to explain to other elected officials, families, community leaders, whomever, about what our next steps is. I personally would support some type of reporting that's going back out to the public as to what has been, you know, where we are in the process, because this is, you know, Mr. Dugas, this is it's a very touchy topic for our parents and for our leaders in the community, because that lack of trust has been, you know, hovering over us for some time. So I definitely want to be able to be in a place where it's not a complicated process, but both areas are addressed with equal respect. The community gets to hear what is being said, or broken down to how they are going to be a part of it, and then also us as the board members can keep that same confidentiality for those individuals that are applying for the position when it gets down to the very last, you know, 3 or 4, whomever. I just think that this needs to stay as clear and as understanding as possible for anyone that's going to be trying to understand what the board's next steps are. I just want to share that. And I know it's been the same message from me from the very beginning, but I'm totally on the side of just being as transparent as possible. And no disrespect, I don't want anyone to lose their jobs, but I'm also like, at the same time, coming into this, you know what you're applying for. You know what level of transparency communities are asking for. So I don't want anyone to be, any person that's coming for this opportunity to lose their employment or let their employment know. But I'm also like, this comes with it in a way. So, just making sure that they also understand that questions are going to be asked, and accountability is going to be asked as well. So that's just my feelings and thoughts on it. But I definitely think the way Mr. Lombard really explained it should be something that we make sure the community understands what our next steps is in that way.
I think everybody's of the same mindset that at some point it needs to be opened up, the candidates, to the public, just not the very early stages, like the split second you submit your resume, boom, now your board knows about it, as opposed to later in the stage, where you're a finalist, now you're going to be told this is going to become public. You're going to need to have a conversation with your own board. But at the very early stages, before you've even been weeded out, that's, I think, where we want to try to protect people's confidentiality. Ms. Castillo?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So I think that part of the reason why the option to disband the superintendent search committee was attractive is because that as the board we could kind of exercise some discretion in determining what parts of the process should be confidential and which shouldn't. As we're having this conversation now and learning that, certain parts of the process would need to be made public because they're subject to FOIA. My question is, would we be able to create the search committee then in such a way that has the I think that we would be able to, so this is not a question, it's a statement. I think we would be able to create the search committee in such a way that offers that same level of discretion that me personally, that I was interested in having disbanded it in the first place and operating as a board, because I figured that maybe we would have that flexibility. In learning that we won't have that flexibility as a board, would we be able to create the search committee then, a new search committee with those considerations in mind? Also, with the consideration in mind that if any member of the search committee violates the confidentiality, the parts of the process that we agree to be confidential, that there would be some, that there would be some repercussion for that. I understand certainly wanting to keep the public involved and being transparent, but I do think that it's appropriate to keep certain processes confidential up until a certain point. And if any board member feels that they're going to struggle with that, or they're not going to have the ability to exercise, confidentiality, then perhaps they shouldn't participate on the superintendent search committee, or that they be disbanded from the committee if it comes out that they've shared information that is confidential.
I think personally that we would all need to agree that information would be made public only if the group agrees that it's at a point where certain information is appropriate to be publicly reported. Like I said in the example before, if we get to a point where, applications have closed, we've got 18 people who have submitted, and we all agree, okay, that's something we should report. So then at the next regular board meeting, that's what's going to get reported, and that kind of thing. But if the group agrees that something is not appropriate to report just yet, then we need to all respect that and agree to keep it private until it gets to a point where we think it is appropriate to make something public. Ms. Baptiste Perez?
I'll go after Mrs. Sullivan.
Okay, Bill?
Yeah, I'm reflecting on what Mr. Lombard said and Ms. Castillo said, and I am in disagreement, especially with the portion of not disclosing our internal candidates and retired superintendents, for the fact being that those candidates' jobs will not be in jeopardy if they're trying to leave. So there's no reason for them to have to seek privacy. So now I'm going to talk about something to probably gain the goal that Mr. Lombard and Mr. Castillo seem to be advocating for, which is to have part of the process open. I personally, before I start, I want every single thing open, but I'm open to compromise. I spoke of fashioning the search committee to a certain extent where it can be achieved. I think those goals can be achieved is by limiting the scope of the search committee to only reviewing resumes and interviewing candidates. That would protect all candidates' privacy, and everything else will be open for discussion at regular board meetings.
What are the other things you're thinking of that would be discussed?
Everything.
I just want to say, I don't think you could treat internal candidates or external candidates differently from one another.
Correct, but we can't do the interim search. We can't split the interim search off from the superintendent search, which we've already voted to do in the last meeting. So we're talking about two different.
Talking about the search committee, and you're talking about internal versus external.
Right, and if we're talking about protecting the confidentiality of the candidates for the permanent superintendent, is which I'm harping on right now. The internal candidates got to be picked quickly. They're not going to be part of an RFP or anything like that. And I don't think their privacy and top concerns are.
Talking about the full-time permanent job.
Correct. And I don't think I don't think we should have the same concerns for the internal candidates, because we're not going to say.
It means interim.
What are you saying, internal or interim?
Both. The internal candidates are applying for the interim and retired superintendents. None of those jobs are going to be in jeopardy. We're not going to say so-and-so director or principal applying for this job. Let's get rid of them as principal. No, we're going to thank them for stepping up. And retired superintendent not going to be in jeopardy with his or her board and get fired. So those concerns are off the table for the interim search.
I think we need to, this discussion is about
the search committee.
Search committee for the permanent job. That's the primary issue we're dealing with.
So is it possible to craft it in such a way where we only act as a search committee out of the public eye for the review of resumes and interviews of candidates?
So not for review for.
Not for RFPs and all that.
The RFP, no, the search committee would not be doing the RFP.
Is there anything else though? What else would we?
I don't know. Is there anything else off the top of it?
I mean, the only thing I would say is, and you guys may even know more about this than I do, but in my experience, the search committee, the search organization that you hire, they may look at a lot of resumes you never see because they just determine they're no good. I just want to make sure you understand, you may not see all the resumes.
Just point of information, that's one of the things that was brought up, that we do want to see each and every resume, whether rejected or not. So.
Okay.
But as far as what the search
Search
committee would do, I can't think of anything else right now besides reviewing and discussing and interviewing.
Right. And how about if it's left open to anything else, any expansion of the search committee's role will take a majority vote of the board?
Say that again?
Possible to craft that way?
Say that again?
Like say we come today and we talk about, it's voted on the proposal that it's only for resume reviews and interviews at the current time. And something comes up that we figure, hey, wait, this is supposed to be private. Comes before the full board to include it as part of the search committee and expand upon it. Would that be a legal construct?
I don't see why you couldn't do that.
I'm still not understanding what.
But I don't even see us doing interviews. as a search committee, would we, or we do it as a full board?
You would do preliminary interviews
Preliminary interview.
that the search firm would guide you through,
Oh, okay.
facilitate.
All right.
And then when you,
The final.
and what you would, with the search firm, you would already prearrange as part of your agreement with them, what you wanted finalists to be. Is it one person, two people, three people? You would determine that. And then once you got to that stage, now those finalists would go to the full board. We're at the end now. And now it starts to become public. But, you know, all the preliminary stuff leading up to that very final stage,
I see, I understand. Right.
we would have the ability to conduct privately with the search consultant guiding us.
Sorry.
I've had my hand up.
She's got her hand up. Hang on, Ms. Brown.
I have a question I need to have clarified. If we were to establish an executive search committee, and want to hold it in at the way we would normally do a special committee with breakout into executive session, are you saying that we would have to list and identify all potential candidates in our notices?
If you conducted this like a subcommittee of the board?
No, I'm asking because this summer we had a special meeting that broke out into executive session
Okay.
where notice to the public did not identify candidates for the deputy superintendent role. It did not list or say interview of Bob Doe, Jane Smith. None of that was included in that notice. And we received 24-hour notice because it's a special meeting. And we weren't even aware that the district was hiring a deputy superintendent. And as far as I know, the written notice to the public did not include their names. So I'm trying to understand, based off our past conduct, why suddenly interviewing or even exploring superintendent candidates couldn't be subject or treated in the same fashion? Or did we do something wrong this summer?
So Tang, to clarify, at the meeting itself, the candidates were announced. They were advised of their right to require that their interview be held in the open meeting.
Mm-hmm.
They both declined. They waived that. And we went into executive session and interviewed
And you
them
identified who they were?
at the meeting.
Yeah.
Publicly online.
I mean,
But during the meeting, not beforehand.
Pardon me?
Notice to the public was not beforehand. It just said interview of candidates for for deputy superintendent. So.
And were you a search committee or just the board at that point?
This was the personnel committee.
Personnel.
Oh, no, this was the full board. The full board did this as a
It was a
special meeting.
It was a special meeting.
So as long, so the notice said what again?
It's taken a while for it to load on my phone. That's why I passed Mr. Sokolovic.
Standard language is typically interviews for the position of ...
Yeah, I think
And we
it's,
don't take any action. We don't.
I think as long as you identified, I think as long as you identified the name when you went into executive session, I think that should have sufficed, but I'd have to take a look at.
In executive session?
No.
Or,
Prior to,
Yeah,
at
when-
the meeting publicly.
and maybe if we get clarification on that particular point, because as far as notifying the public in advance of who we're interviewing, we haven't done that. We didn't do that for an executive level search this summer. And I can express as a board member, not knowing that we were hiring a deputy in advance, not being notified of the candidates. I shared some of the concerns that the community shares with the superintendent searches, that we're going to be bombarded with candidates out of nowhere. And so if I could get clarification on that, that point, that would be extremely helpful.
I'll take a look at that.
Can I ask a question on that? So is the question around the thought that applications might not have to be revealed even if there's not a search committee? Is that what you're asking?
That's the problem I'm struggling with.
And yeah, this is the way we've,
Wait, could you repeat
Because-
your question?
Yeah, so what I'm trying to understand, what we were saying, to me, it sounds like you might be asking, is it plausible or possible or feasible, therefore, based on what happened in the past, that as applications come in through the search firm, they don't have to be identified, even if we don't have a search committee? Is that what you're asking? That it could be kept confidential anyway? Is that what you're asking?
Not necessarily. I was trying to decipher your idea of like it's an all zero sum game.
Right.
And then when it came to the deputy superintendent search, our notice to the public didn't say we were interviewing two candidates, their names,
And we didn't know about any other applicants.
and we didn't know about any other applicants, and we weren't informed that an applicant was actually going to be hired. So I think it's a strong suggestion that if we do go forward with a search committee, that there's an assignment of roles, maybe a limitation or requirements as far as reporting goes forward, and that way transparency should be clear to the public. Also, I do have another question. What happens if the search committee is not the full board? Is there any kind of FOIA legal ramifications?
No, I don't think so.
So it does not have to be the full board.
I will say, in the past, I saw a board appoint, one time they appointed their personnel committee, the members of their personnel committee, to act as a search committee. Another time, they appointed their 3 officers to serve as the search committee. I've seen it a lot of different ways. Full board, a handful of people. It can be done a lot of different ways.
But I couldn't imagine
The
anything.
committee itself, whether it's the full board or 3 people, it still functions in the same way. What are you saying, Joe?
No, I was just saying, but I wouldn't want to have anything competing,
You what?
where there's like some people here and some people there.
No. I'm just,
If there was a search committee, there's one search committee,
yes.
whoever's on it.
Yes.
So,
Mr. Castillo.
just to you as a-
Castillo.
Mr. Chair?
Yeah. What was it,
I
Bob?
had another question regarding the deputy superintendent. Is the deputy superintendent, because prior to having the position, I understood that, the superintendent was was our one employee to the Board of Education. And then this deputy superintendent position was introduced. Is the deputy superintendent our second employee, or are they?
No.
No, you have one employee, which is the superintendent. And as I was listening to this, what was going through my mind is, why are you even approving it? Because unless you have a specific bylaw that requires it, and I can't recall, generally speaking, the hiring of a deputy, just like a finance business manager, is the sole discretion of the superintendent.
What happened was, Mr. Testani, he had 2 finalist candidates.
Mm-hmm.
And before he met with them himself to make his decision to hire them, he wanted some feedback from us. So we didn't decide anything. We interviewed the 2 candidates. We gave our sentiments on both to the HR executive director,
Mm-hmm.
and conveyed it to Mr. Testani, and then he met with them himself, and he made his decision. I think he just wanted a little buy-in,
Okay, thank you.
a little understanding. You have your hand up earlier,
That makes a little more sense.
Bobby?
Thank you.
I'm all
You have your
set.
hand-
I'm all set.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that on some. We got hangry.
Instead of tooth pulled, I can't.
Oh, that's right. We got hangry last time, so.
Just to
So-
figure out how to open this.
Mr. Chair?
Mr. Benahan.
Yeah. I don't know if you're familiar of how the Student Government Council bylaws. You never see the Student Government Council bylaws? It's almost similar, not complete, but it's almost similar how we hiding principals. Had to be parents and it had to be staff, And it's just some meetings we had to do it, because protocol and policy, we had to do it, in private secretary section. But it's almost, I don't know, Mr. Floyd, do you have a similar?
I haven't.
The bylaws, it will and I will email it to you. It's almost similar how we did something the superintendent of the school, because we had to follow the protocol and the policy and how the step by step. But all the time at the end, we let another community who's going to be, the end of the meeting, who's going to be the principal. So it look almost familiar
So
when I say that.
here's another couple of thoughts, or one. We don't necessarily have to have a search committee. What some places do, you have to have a lot of trust, is you just hire the search firm and have them bring you top 3 as the full board. That's what some places do. They just hire a search consultant and they say, you take the reins, and we want to see what the top 2 or 3 finalist candidates are. And through your agreement with them, you give them their market. This is what we're looking for. This is the level of engagement we want. We expect you to do it. And you remove yourself from that aspect of the process and only insert yourself when they say, hey, we've got 3 people. They can give you a briefing of how they got to that. And then you have your public interviews and you go from there.
I don't think that's good.
I'm not advocating, I'm just saying, some people do it that way. Ms. Baptiste?
I have a question. Could you point to me where in Connecticut statutes states that there's only 2 search committees that can be,
There's not.
or search firms that can be engaged before the?
Nothing in
There's no
statute.
statute,
No.
to my knowledge,
No.
that governs that at all.
There's city purchasing regulations that allow you to solicit a minimum number of bids if it's below a certain dollar threshold. And in Connecticut, there were only 2 educational executive search firms. You could have done that. It would have been a quick and easy. The board chose to go a full nationwide RFP, which we're allowed to do. And that's the direction we're going. But this was a local city purchasing regulation that permitted this if you wanted to just pick one of these 2 firms. The board decided not to do that. So now we're past that and we're doing a full RFP.
No, I just wanted to be clear, it's not necessarily in the law.
Nope.
I do have a question. When the bylaws are silent as to a committee member's scope of power, in terms of selecting or engaging search committee firms, is there any kind of limitations according to Connecticut law?
No.
So when notice of Mr. Testani's resignation came forward, since the bylaws are silent, as a board member, I could have engaged with 2 search firms of my choice and presented to the board.
No, you don't have that authority.
So if there's no authority designated,
Pardon me?
no, you can finish.
Hang on,
Thank you.
let's get,
No,
I'm going to explain,
no,
what
I
happened
would like the attorney to,
and I'm going to explain the background of what happened. Okay?
you're
That's-
clarifying
I'm the-
according to your opinion.
And then he can-
And I don't recall
And he can verify,
ways, but I
but
believe you interrupted and continue to do so because he may actually identify that you acted out of line.
so I'm the chairman and I have certain administrative functions. One of which is to provide the board with information to make its decisions. I set the agenda and I do all of those things so that the board is empowered to make the choices it wants to make. There are only 2 Connecticut-based educational search firms. In the interest of celerity, I requested a simple proposal from each of them and provided them to everyone. I didn't tell you you had to pick one or the other, and then I placed it on the agenda, and the board decided thumbs down to both of them. But I'm not breaking any, I don't believe, correct me if I'm wrong, that I'm breaking any law in getting information for the board to consider and do whatever they want with it.
There's nothing wrong with getting information. Just understand the full board has to approve whatever committee you contract for that group.
And the board decided to not pick either of them. And we're moving on to another process.
Okay.
So.
Do you see that if, legally, is there any issue if there's a conflict of interest with engaging with certain entities? So if I'm on, hypothetically, I'm on CABE's executive board or board of directors, or I'm the CES representative, solely selecting those two entities could be a conflict to present to the board?
Well, first of all, you have to,
So to clarify, I am the board's representative to CABE, of which we are a member, and I am the representative to CES.
okay, well, there's only a conflict of interest. There's no law in the state of Connecticut that applies to you all regarding conflict of interest, except for the local ordinance in Bridgeport. Okay, and so, and that really, like most ordinances about conflict of interest, speak to a personal financial interest in the outcome. So unless it was a personal financial interest in the outcome, I'm hard pressed to see that there would be a conflict of interest. If whether it's Mr. Weldon or anybody else, I mean, frankly, you know, there's probably a representative on CABE from every single board of education in this state. And when they vote to pick CABE as a search committee, it doesn't mean there's a conflict of interest there. They have no personal interest in the outcome. So I think, respectfully, I think that's a bit of a stretch.
Even if it's the same person on both boards, as same person as representative who didn't consult with the rest of the board and gave us the two options, that doesn't sound at least questionable.
There's no conflict of it. I mean, have to look again at Bridgeport's conflict of interest ordinance, but if it's like most, it says you have to have, it's a conflict if you have a personal financial interest and you don't announce it, or you know, obviously you can't accept ifs and things of that nature. So it's hard for me to imagine that it's a conflict even under the ordinance, but I don't have it in front of me and defer to city attorney's office on that.
Any other questions?
Thank you, Chair.
No, Mr. Benahan?
Yeah. Chair, I want to say this, and that's nothing go personal, but, and I don't like it. I tell you right away straight. I don't like it when you say, I'm the chair, I'm this. We understand that, but don't forget that you're the chair because us, the board members, we vote for you to be the chair.
Mm-hmm.
As me, I did it. So just be sure when you say I'm the chair, it's like you had the power over everything because we are the 9 board members. And I hate when people say, I got the title, I'm the chair, I do whatever I want. I really upset that because we're here as a team to work together to the best for Bristol School. But I have some question. When will the ad go in the newspaper? And when will the notice fulfill with the city clerk office?
Huh?
I'm going to repeat it again. When will the ad go in the newspaper?
For what?
And when will for the situation about searching, superintendent school? They don't need to go to the outside to the public newspaper, nothing like that?
For what?
Superintendent?
For the job?
No.
For what?
For the situation we're doing the search out of superintendent school, they don't need to go out in a notice newspaper, no information go out in the newspaper. That's my question.
So when we get to the point where we hire a search firm, they will be responsible for advertising for the position. will advertise it nationally. They would likely advertise it in certain trade publications. They might put an ad in the Connecticut Post, but I think they would most likely place an ad in periodicals that are actively read by people in public education. But that would be their responsibility.
And I can say that the resume should be sent, you should be not be sent it to the superintendent of school or only to you. My point of view, that what I understand, it will send to the all board members and we can check and review, you know, what's going on, what I can do, because maybe you can say something I'm not agree, or you agree something I don't agree, you know, back and forth. Because if they're gonna be sending, let's see, to only to you or send it to other superintendent school, it's not gonna be, right?
Are we still talking about the permanent job?
We're talking about, I'll go general about the resume, whoever's gonna apply for it.
All right, so the search firm, the one who received all the resumes, and then they would gather us and go through them with us. So they would become the point, the search firm. They would collect all the resumes. They would arrange the meetings with us. They would walk us through screening them and weeding them out to get to the point where if candidates you want to have a preliminary interview with, they would just continue walking us through the process until we got to a point where we had 2 or 3 finalist candidates. So it wouldn't come to me, wouldn't go to the superintendent's office. It would all go to the search consultant. And they would take it from there.
So they're the one that can decide.
And hang on, and if it was the board's directive that we don't want you to hold anything back, we want to see everything, then that's what they'll do.
Yeah.
They'll do whatever you ask. So what was your other question?
No, I just want to clarify with that. I just want to let you know.
That's why I say, once you get to the point where you have a search firm, we come way out of it. We're not receiving anything unless it's through them. They're coordinating the meetings. They have no interest in having only a couple of people show up. They have every interest to coordinate it so that it's convenient for everybody to show up. They have every interest in giving us all the information we tell them we want. And like I said, it really takes us as individuals out of it. We can show up when it's convenient and do the real work that needs to be done. And they'll do all the legwork to get us to that.
All right. Thank you. No more questions, Mr. Chair.
And
Mr. Chair?
I want to clarify, 1 second, I want to clarify, I apologize, Albert. When I say I'm the chairman, I say that to say that it should be understood that there is some administrative work that comes with this role. And my objective is to try to give people what they need to make the choices that they want to make. I have no interest in what the choice is. Even in this one, we're only talking about this because it occurred to me that we may have done something that is not in our best interests. I want us to have this discussion again so that everybody's on the same page. If you really want to do it as the Board of Ed, understand it comes with another price. So that's all this is about. I'm really trying to get this group to make thoughtful decisions and work together as a group. I'm not trying to cram anything down anybody's throat. I want to point out that, at this point, we are 6 weeks through, we're halfway through the 90 days notice that Mike gave us. And so things are starting to get a little bit urgent and I need to make some choices in the fairly near future as a group. And we need to trust a little more, I think, and get information that we need. Ms. Castillo and then Mr. Sakala.
I just wanted to say, just to add to what you were just saying, as long as we continue to have open dialogue like this, I don't think it should be an issue to to come into agreement about what our next steps are. There's been a couple parts of this process that have felt a little, you know, strong arm into one way or the other. And I feel that with this board, when we sit down and have thorough conversation the way that we are now and the way that we have had in the past, we're most productive. I was curious about the our last board meeting. We discussed, you know, opening up the RFP and collecting resumes from the retired superintendent list. Can you just give a quick update on where we're at with those items?
Is that appropriate, Floyd?
Yeah, as long as you speak generally.
Right, generally. So Mr. Pires is updating his latest and greatest RFP that he has from, I guess it was 3 years ago. He's updating dates and timelines and things like that so that he'll have a decent document to work through with us sometime in the next week as we develop the scope of work. In terms of the interim position, the state list, all the people on the state list were solicited all the very next day, like a week ago, were solicited. All holders of an 093 in the district also solicited. They were solicited directly by HR because AppleTrack does not require you to post a resume as an internal candidate because we have a lot of your information. So to force people to provide a physical resume, HR sent an email to each of the 6 093 certified people. From a general standpoint, I will say that we've received responses from both pools. I don't want to get into numbers because we did agree to a 10-day period, and that 10-day period ends Friday. So when Friday comes and goes, packages will be finalized for us to look at. The superintendent's office is already assembling those packages with what's come in so far. So when 5 o'clock on Friday comes, we will have packages to look at. And the next question is, one, when would everybody be available to meet sometime next week to review that information? Two, with respect to the search committee, if we establish it, do we want to review those resumes as a search committee? I will say that there has been communication that if the interim process, if their information is going to be made public, they will withdraw. Not all have said that, but that should be considered. And if it's decided that we are going to operate as the full board publicly with reviewing the interim resumes, we'd be obligated to let all those people know that that's the rules. Those are the rules of engagement now, just so you're aware, and see what happens. But I think they've all come into it with the assumption, based on how it's typically done, that that process would have a level of confidentiality. And so if that's not going to be the case, we're going to need to make that crystal clear. People who have submitted, and if they want to withdraw, they can do that. So I'm just putting that out there for your thoughts.
Okay, my next question is, well, firstly, I just want to say one thing, because I know that there was some, you know, I had explained that the 093 certification was different than the 092. So I just want the record to reflect that this is the reason why I found it necessary to clarify that there is a difference between 093 and 092, because I was met with a lot of public backlash about, oh, the thousands and thousands of principals in the district that are eligible and qualified and have the certification to be superintendent. And it doesn't seem that there is. It seems that there's actually a very small number of people in the district with an 093 certification, which is what I expected in the first place, because the superintendent, there's only one superintendent job in any one district. So anyway, I just wanted to make that point. And there was one other thing, and it's escaping me. It's escaping me right now. Oh, I just wanted to make sure that our 10 days is underway. So that's
2 days left.
Thank you. All right, great, awesome, thank you.
And to clarify, if we were to select somebody without an 093, but with an 092, we would have to gain approval from the Commissioner of Education.
Correct.
So it's an added wrinkle. Whereas an 093, you just have to let the commissioner know this is the person we've selected. We're putting them on record with your office, but they've got the certification, and you provide, well, I mean, they've got the certification themselves in the CSDE to verify. So.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Albert?
No, Mr. Jessucker, have the hand first.
Yeah, Ms. Castillo addressed most of my concerns, because I was concerned when I didn't see, I looked today on AppleTrack and I didn't see it. But
That was
how did,
because it was.
that was clarified, but I'm wondering how we determined that only 6 people in the district.
Have records. We know what our people have. It's a license. We need to keep track of it, and if it expires, that's a problem. So we need to know of all our certified staff.
But do we need to keep track of it as far as just have a position if they like get an additional certification if they don't use that certification? Do we look it up? Like say, just randomly just say, who got an 093, or is it just like automatically reported? It's what I'm getting at is because the reason I was more comfortable with the AppleTrack is if somebody has one we don't know about, that they can make themselves known to us.
Why would you go through a year full of school, pay 15 or 20,000, get the certification, and then not let your employer know that you have it?
Because you're trying to get out.
I'm just.
Well, I believe in the Board of Education, I believe that the salaries are they're on a, what do you call it, the step scale. So you would want to let your employer know, because if you have, extra additional years of education or certification, then you're going to get
Ms.
more money.
Castillo, to clarify, I believe that's it. Right. I believe that's only education-wise, not certification-wise, unless you're utilizing that certification. But I'm done yet with the point. But that was that point. I just would like further clarification, just to ensure there was nobody overlooked and only certain people were invited to apply is one thing. So I don't know how
I mean, there aren't that many administrators. You theoretically could just go on the state website, type all their names in to verify that it really is only 6.
Right. Yeah, they're just wondering if it's been done, but also further point was as far as the interim superintendents backing out for non-disclosure, it really makes no sense whether they are exposed when they get the job or if they don't have, especially with our internal candidates. If somebody wants to secretly apply.
I'm just saying, it's been communicated. If this is going to become a public thing, I'm going to withdraw. And one of the individuals who said that, I think, is someone, well, you would not want to lose necessarily. And I think we're at a stage where, there's not that many of them have made a submission. I know I would not want to lose 1, 2, or 3 of them over that. We're the ones in need of them. So I just think we should be mindful of that.
Understood.
And it's going to go however it's going to go.
The only other thing that I would add is I have sat in meetings with some very smart people who have made some statements in public, either in public or private, that they certainly should not have made in public.
Absolutely.
Without thinking. And that's the other reason for kind of keeping it
right
in a in a search committee.
Yeah, and in that respect is why I always vote for public interviews, but private. That's for executive, because while we're going to be discussing people's pros and cons, and
Yep.
something could slip out, and that should be definitely, I always advocate for.
You know, I heard she or he did X.
Right. And that's something you don't want.
Slander somebody.
Correct.
You know?
Thank you.
Okay.
I think Albert was.
Albert?
And the chair, Mr. Floyd, what is the difference between 092, 093? When you say 092, Mr. Commissioner, like you explained before, Commissioner this and that. We don't want later that the 092 or something happened that the superintendent have the 092 had to have later 093. We don't want to go back and forth. I would prefer, of course, have somebody 093 and not go back and forth what we had before with Mr. Testani to let him finish the 093. So explain me a little bit with your words, the difference between 092, 093, please.
093 is the certificate you have to be a superintendent of schools. There is a process if you are in a program where you can make an application to get basically provisional approval to be a superintendent with the understanding that you're going to complete it. An 092 is basically what your principals and supervisors have to have. So they're not qualified to be a superintendent with just an 092.
But like you said, if the commissioner said, we like this person 092.
Interim.
Acting.
But not for
Permanent.
permanent. Thank you for verifying that. Appreciate it.
And in Mr. Testani's case, I think he was partly approved because he showed he was already enrolled in an 093 program that was scheduled to complete well before the end of that year. So that was taken into consideration.
Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner.
Right. Thank you. No more questions.
Any other questions? Okay. So now that we've understood all of this, you all feel we understand this pretty well?
Mr. Chair, we understand very clear and
Make sure that there's lingering.
no, we understand and we clear. The only thing I believe I can say by myself and the other ones will agree that we want, like you said before, have a good communication, try to, work together as a team, respect each other, and try to do the best we can have somebody for Bristol School. That's the only thing, as have a good communication, not hide nothing, don't break the policy, don't break the protocol. Let's be everybody on the same page, and I know we can have successful, searches. That's the only thing about.
This is, you guys know, this is probably one of the most important decisions you will make.
Yes.
In your career on the board, not just this year, so.
So, I know the next item on the agenda is to talk about possibly having a search committee, but I think if we were to vote on that, we would need to know what that search committee would look like. And not just say have one, but have one that is KEC. I think that would be important, that we set that out. That's what we're voting for.
Right. And that can be constructed.
About that tonight, or do you want to?
Well, I don't think anyone, especially people who voted not to have the search committee, would be in a position to vote differently without knowing what the search committee would be,
So from what I've heard over the course of the evening.
Right.
Sounds like we would want to give regular reports on our activities. We would want to agree that the search committee will only meet when there is at least 5 of us. Is that correct?
That was something I.
Quorum? Want to make it higher,
Yeah,
but
quorum.
but that also every effort will be made to accommodate everyone's schedule so that everyone can be present when they need.
You let her know in advance.
Means we got to wait another week before we meet. So be it. I think it's important enough that we accommodate everyone's schedule rather than, try to rush through it. And that we agree that information will only become public when there is consensus among the committee to make it public, and that we will not individually release information that the group has already decided we don't want to do that yet. that fair enough to say?
I think so.
Joe?
I'd like to add that let's overlook the definement of roles, whether like how with all our other committees, there is a chair for each committee. Also, define what consensus means. So if it's going to be a simple majority, that should be clear as well.
Mm-hmm. Okay, consensus is defined as a majority of the people in the meeting.
So 3 or more.
Yeah, at least. And as far as roles, we all have the same role. There's at this point, there's really no reason for any of us to be doing anything outside of the guidance of our search firm.
Would the administration of calling a meeting and coordinating a meeting, would that be done by the eventual search firm? Or
Yes.
prior to that, would that be done by one of us, like a chair?
You could appoint someone as a, what do you call it? An organizer. Because that's the only thing that we're doing at this point is somebody's got to make the phone calls or send the emails or the doodle poll.
And what would determine why and when we would meet?
I think at this point, there's no reason for us to meet until we have a search firm
Okay.
that's working with us.
Okay.
Unless you want to, again, have the search committee deal with the issue of the interim.
Right,
So do we, and in that event, we can schedule that now. So do you want to have the search committee encompass also reviewing resumes for the interim?
Yeah, before we get to that, I had something to add to your original statement, limiting the scope of the search committee to reviewing resumes and interviews.
I was going to say, it's clear the search committee cannot vote or take any action.
Correct.
Any vote or any action is taken by the full board in public
Correct.
based on a consensus of the search committee. So if the search committee says, okay, I think we've got somebody that we're ready to take some action on. Let's have a public meeting on this day.
Correct. I just want to make
Action.
sure that up until that point, unless we're interviewing candidates or reviewing resumes, which is a highly sensitive information we all seem to be trying to protect, every other meeting should be in public.
Right, like reviewing the RFP and all that.
Correct.
The RFP is a function of the board.
Correct.
Right, so-
But I think any motion that comes has to be explicitly stated, the limitation of scopes on the meeting. So whoever is administering it or calling it doesn't circumvent this full board for other issues and try to put any additional items under.
No, the board can do whatever they want as the board. But really, this committee should really just be charged with screening resumes with the consultant that we hire. That's all we're doing.
Well,
And then
you're also going to talk to the consultant about process.
And but I'm saying we're interfacing with the consultant and we're giving them the guidance of what we want to see happen. And they're going to agree to it. We want a high level of public involvement. So if you want this contract, you're going to need to show us how you're going to achieve it.
Can I just ask about that since we're really getting down to the nitty? We talk about talk to the consultant about process. Isn't that something we would have laid out in the RFP?
Yeah, I was just going to say, that all would be in the RFP.
That's all out in the open.
That's all out in the open anyway. And when you get to the point where you've got a finalist that you're going to make an award to,
Correct.
you're going to negotiate your contract and make sure that these deliverables are in there. So that's all going to be public anyway.
Yes.
Castillo have the hand up.
Ms. Castillo? Are you there? Or is your hand up from before?
Oh, she's gone.
Oh, she just
dropped off.
Okay.
Oh, she was driving.
Wait a minute.
It did sound like that, didn't it? Yeah, I would like to get back. Is Mike here? I mean, I see it says Mike guest, but.
Yeah, do you have anything to say? Mike, you've been really silent. If you're there, you're muted.
Good evening. Good evening,
Hi.
everyone. I have nothing right now to say. I'm just listening up and
Always.
Okay.
everything is pretty clear. Thank you.
I'm like you now.
Just wait a minute, see if Erica comes back.
Ms. Brown?
You have anything to say, Ms. Brown?
No, I'm all set.
You good for now? Okay.
Mhm.
Maybe she.
Yes, you can.
Yep. Yeah,
Hit the wrong-
let them in, the strange phone number.
Phone ran out.
Okay, is that you, Erica?
Who is that blue circle?
Who's the blue circle? What's the phone?
Is it me?
Yes.
Erica? Okay, so we're all back together. We didn't do anything. We saw you dropped off. We waited for you to come back.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I have pretty bad service, but I'm gonna try to stay connected as much as I can at this point.
So we've kind of defined this. It's in the recorded thing. Go back.
Thank you, John.
The only thing I want to clarify, are we applying this also to the review of interim resumes? Review only. Again, the search committee does not take action. We agreeable to that?
Joe?
Generally?
So we don't want the.
No, I'm actually not agreeable to what I suggested for the whole entire thing, but I think it's a good compromise if it's going to be done. So I won't be devastated if I'm outvoted. I can understand the rationale behind it. I just don't agree with it. And I always want things totally open.
Okay.
But I'm maybe considered a bit of an extremist, but that's how I've reported myself throughout my.
I think we should do.
Gonna do two?
We should do two.
All right.
Okay.
So is there a motion to establish the search committee with the parameters we just outlined, separate from the issue of for the permanent opening?
So moved.
Second.
Okay,
Motion to amend to define how many members will be on the search committee. Will it be a committee of the full board?
this would be a committee, so to clarify, this would be a committee of the full board. Was that your intended motion, Joe?
Yeah, oh yeah, that's what I thought it was.
Okay.
Yeah.
You too, Albert?
Yeah.
Thought it'd be all of us. Okay. That's clarified. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Now, a second motion, will the established search committee also be tasked with reviewing resumes for the position of interim superintendent?
Discussion?
Was there a motion before the discussion? I'll make the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Okay, let's
Second.
So,
discuss now.
so, okay. So I understand in this case, what the options are. So one option is without the search committee, then all applicants, even the one you mentioned that would want their application withdrawn, all applicants would be FOIA, would be public information.
The resumes,
Their right.
everything.
Their resumes, as well as the fact that they're interested, would be public information. And we would do any kind of discussions around weeding them down and all that stuff, all out in public forum. There would be nothing done, you can't do executive session. So the discussions about it and everything would be out in the public.
Yes, sir.
Or if we do a search committee,
If we include it in the search.
if we include it in the search committee, we have the option of still making them public if we want? Okay, so we can still make their resumes public, but we could at least do the discussions and interviews.
Views and all that.
But we could still, if we choose to, make their resumes public.
Yeah.
That's not on the table one way or the other.
Well, but if you did that, you would have to advise them
Right, yes, of course, you have to let them know.
beforehand.
Right, but so all that, so that's, this is giving us that same thing where we could do things, the conversations and private and so forth. All right,
And in the end, your final decision has to be made in public with the full board at a public meeting.
Okay, so my concern was that if we went to search committee, that would de facto mean that their resumes would remain private. But it doesn't mean that. They could still be public if we choose that and we let them know.
It's true.
But, okay, I know I'm totally against it, but doesn't that negate the whole fact of giving everybody the comfort of being the search committee?
Of what?
In other words,
I mean, if we leave ourselves open to the ability, I can't believe I'm doing this.
if you're going to have a search committee conduct the interim
This is
process,
for a separate.
Right, yeah, I understand. I'm actually supporting what you want against what I want. Because if somebody's like saying, I'm out, they're looking for assurances of privacy, and then we could pivot to make a public at the last minute, their assurance of privacy is really not worth the paper we're writing it on.
well, I think the issue of privacy comes also with respect to personal information that may be on the resume, things like that. So you don't want the resume documents themselves to necessarily be public, which is what they would be if we were operating as the full board. So Connecticut Post could just send a FOIA request. I want all the resumes. And you'd have to give them to them. But if we're just using the search committee as a mechanism to work toward finalist candidate, once you get to the finalist candidate, you can make the announcement public.
I just like the opportunity to have discussion and that's the only thing that I'm concerned with. I'm not as concerned about as Mr. Sakala pointed out at the beginning of the meeting, about their interest being made public, because they are people who put their names on a list.
Yeah, no.
Or we know them from our staff, who they are. And I mean, maybe they wouldn't want to be embarrassed if they didn't get it. I don't know. If their fellow principals to know they went for it, didn't get it. I'm trying to imagine why they would want it private. Maybe there is a time. But like that concerns me less than just having the ability to speak amongst ourselves, not out in public. So I feel like we need the search committee to take on the interim process as well. And this is almost a separate decision regarding making their application public or not. I'm not sure if that's.
Well, as the committee, you make that decision. I think Mr. Weldon is just talking about it as a courtesy to folks, letting them know in case they want to withdraw their name.
We're not making it.
You could even, when you get to the point where you have a finalist, you report, we received resumes from these 8 people. Boom, 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 boom.
We just wouldn't have to give out the resume.
We don't have to give out the resume because that was part of the search committee. So their personal information would be protected. But you could get into, hey, we had a pool of X people. Since it's such a short list, this is who they were. Maybe you've heard of them.
Right.
And now somebody make a motion for the 4 finalists.
Okay, yeah. So that's all I need to know.
Okay. So is there anything else? Okay, so.
I have a question.
Okay.
So Friday, all candidates who are interested in applying for the interim role, we're supposed to have a review.
No, Friday is the closing date.
The closing date.
We need to make a decision, and this is a whole separate discussion from what we're talking about here, but we'll need to make a decision of when it's convenient for all of us to come back together to review what's come in. But first, we need to decide if the search committee is going to take on this function or not.
Why would we need the search committee to do that? Because we're worried about FOIA on their resumes?
Also, so you can have candid discussions in private without having to worry about what's said about individual people.
I'm just failing to understand how this is distinguished from what happened this summer, because all of our conversations for the deputy role was an executive session. So it was protected under executive session. So I don't see why it needs to go to the search committee.
I'm not quite following, but
because if the board comes to be in possession of resumes as the board, all that information becomes subject to FOIA.
Okay, so Ms. Baldwin's resume and the other candidate resume from this summer is subject to FOIA.
Unless
They went
ask
through
for-
HR.
Unless
So how
they
does
ask
that-
for confidentiality.
But like the other possible other candidates for that deputy superintendent position were not, because they didn't come to the board.
If it did,
They were just applicants.
Well, it went to CES since they administered this process.
I think the
So that-
thing is because the board's doing this.
Yeah.
Mhm.
I think the main distinguishing factor between the two is that the search committee allows total anonymity to the candidates with the names, whereas if we have a special meeting, we can have the choice to give the discussion anonymous in executive session, but we would have to name the candidates going into executive session.
Have to name them.
Known, and then it would be subject to FOIA, the information we went in with, I believe, correct?
And the resumes. If you're operating as the board, now the resumes are FOIable as well.
Which for the record,
Which again, if in the end you're trying to get the best, okay, I wouldn't want a good candidate to withdraw and then we lose that. So I think we need to try to protect our candidate pool, that we can try to pick the best person.
Well,
And if a couple of the top tier people say, well, I'm not doing that, and they pull it, well, you lost that opportunity.
Okay, just have another question regarding the search committee. What are the ramifications if something was to be leaked out, like a meeting or anything like that? What are the consequences?
is it the same as executive session?
yeah, I mean, that's what I'm thinking. It's, you could censor somebody. I mean, the difference is if it's an executive session, that's a FOIA violation. This wouldn't even be a FOIA violation, frankly.
Really is no right.
Somebody may have, a cause of action for breach of confidentiality. I don't know. That's the only thing I can think of.
Well, and this was one of the conditions when we just did this, was that, the board could take action to remove someone from the search committee if the board determined that someone was just completely violating.
We didn't say
We
that.
didn't
We
say
didn't
that,
say-
so.
We talked, but we didn't say
We
that.
talked about it, but that would be something the full board could do.
Right, but we didn't say that.
Oh, no, but that's an action they could take. It was talked about separately, but you could do that.
So there's no consequence if, so, okay, that's,
It's whatever consequence we set. That's our only, but if nobody wanted to do that, if nobody wanted to do that, or they just wanted to give somebody a warning, it's up to the group.
I feel is if we got a policy and the way they're supposed to follow, and then surely nobody has to say about it. And I agree with Sarah about
A lot of,
for the committee, be part because, there's no trust.
that's what I'm saying. A lot of this is the honor system. We need to be able to trust in each other to do the right things. We agreed that we wouldn't individually release anything that the group didn't already decide was releasable. And if we're all going to live by that, well, that's the honor system. And if somebody deviates from that, then the board needs to decide, how bad a violation was it? Do you just need to have a talk with the person or what? But in the end, the decision is up to us.
yeah, for the record, since I got the biggest mouth, I would,
The only one.
I've never violated executive session, even though I voted against every single one. And I think if the board comes to a decision, we should all respect that decision, whether we like it or not. We're obligated as members of this board to follow it. I mean, unless something gregarious happens, if you guys say in committee meeting that, oh, we're not hiring somebody, like something weird out of the blue that's like totally out of context of the committee, like
Discriminatory.
racial slur or something like that, be advised that I would make that public, but anything else is like really.
You know the rule, Joe. You never break the policy. You like me with big mouth.
I think if we come to an agreement, we're going to do something a certain way. I think everybody here will abide by that because it's been talked about and we've agreed to it. So
We lost another board member off this call.
who did we lose?
Lost-
Erica again.
Erica gone?
Oh, wait a minute.
I don't think she's coming back.
No.
She said she had bad, because that was a different login than the last one.
Called in.
Maybe you could do like you did for me with executive session and call her up. You don't know her number? It's on the text.
Put her on speaker.
Yeah. If she even has reception, that's the point, I think.
Well, that's,
Will you explain to Ms. Sibyl everything, Mr. Chair?
I spoke with her earlier. Because of the rain, and she wasn't feeling well herself.
How about but you will call her later or whatever?
I'll explain to her what everything happened.
Excuse me. Oh, Michael's on.
Hello?
Hi, Erica.
Hold on. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I hear you.
Okay.
Okay.
Point of order, Mr. Chair. If you can move it closer to the microphone so the public might be able to hear.
Have you on speaker, Erica?
Okay, you're on speaker. I'm putting you by the microphone for John McLeod so he can record you if you say anything. Did you have anything you wanted to add? I think the discussion seems to be pretty much over before we take a vote.
Okay, yeah, I have nothing to add. I'm ready to vote.
Okay. So all in favor in having the review of resumes for the interim superintendent position be a part of the search committee, signify by saying aye.
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 Can we get a roll call, please?
Okay, roll call.
John, well,
Got it?
You probably want, as a precursor, say, appoint the board as the search committee for purposes of, or the scope, something like that.
okay.
I think we,
So we already had the motion on the floor that this was going to be
You're right.
included in the scope
Right.
of the committee. So roll call vote, John Weldon, yes. Bobby Brown,
I abstain.
Joe Lombard,
Yes.
Sybil Allen is not here, Christine Baptiste Perez,
Pass.
Albert Benahan,
Pass.
Erica Castillo,
Aye.
Michael Macarone,
Yes,
okay, Joe Sokolovic,
no,
John Bobby Brown. Oh, she abstained, that's right. Christine Baptiste Perez, again, this is just to review resumes. The final,
Can you explain? Yeah,
the final pick would be by the full board in public. This is just for reviewing resumes,
it's to review resume.
that's all.
The search committee reviews the resumes.
Yeah. And
How's
the
the-
public vote is at the full board at a full public board meeting.
In other words, us, the board members, we are the one review the resume, right?
In private.
As the
Private.
search committee.
Search committee.
And then when you're ready, you go to become the full board.
I abstain.
Okay. Albert. You passed.
Yes, but you said you're gonna do it in private. I said no. I don't want private. No.
Motion carries 4 in favor, 2 against,
To abstain.
and 2 abstain. Okay. Next item on the agenda is the request for a special meeting that was received this past Friday. I think we've covered a lot of this stuff with respect to the issues of the Apple-Track, resumes of all applicants to date. You're going to see everything that came through the door, and superintendent's office is assembling that. Review of great cities, and we talked about the RFP. Mr. Pires is cleaning up the document to be able to present to us to finalize. And he'll have that ready in sometime the next week. And there's review of great city schools, superintendent search materials. I don't know what this is.
I'm sorry, I missed the beginning.
So I was just explaining that a lot of the things in your request, we've already talked about. The RFP, Tony Pires is cleaning it up to bring to us in the next week to finalize. We talked about the AppleTrack link, and that this was done through HR and the reasons why. You're going to get all the resumes of internal and from the list that have been submitted, and the superintendent's office is compiling those packages as we speak, and the process ends in 2 days, and that'll be it. So we'll need to decide what day next week everybody's free to do that. The only outstanding item that I don't quite understand is review of great city schools superintendent search materials.
Well,
What is that?
also on that, it has a public comment
First item.
item on the agenda. So
It's stuff.
open it up to maybe giving the public some time after listening to the last board meeting, this special meeting, to comment with the status of the superintendent and interim superintendent.
We could do that Tuesday.
See, the problem with that
Let's
is,
just give a report. This is where we are.
but have public comment at the special meeting is especially important because, and have everything separated in a special meeting rather than do it at a regular board meeting, because the last board meeting was over.
What I'm saying is all these items on your thing here, we just talked about.
Correct, but we still got to construct the RFP and look at the thing, so we still got to have it.
Do that, and that would be a special meeting.
Correct, and that's what,
Some distinct thing.
exactly what was requested.
But I'm just saying, that we've already talked about this is where we are. We're going to be meeting to discuss the RFP in the next week.
Correct.
So when that happens, if you want a public comment period for that, we can do that.
Yes. And to clarify, the Great City Schools is, they're more experienced in urban districts, and they got a template. I could send it to you so we could just disseminate it to the whole board.
They do searches.
They do not do searches, but they do have a good guided.
But to be clear, because I want to make it crystal clear, because the first thing I thought was if these guys actually do have a search component to them, that would be a huge conflict. So you
Right, no,
crystal clear, they don't do that.
they're not being considered for any.
Well, then what I would say,
And they also got a list of a whole bunch of statewide search firms and people who've used search firms, because they got a whole list of everybody who use search firms that we could actually utilize as well. Because the reason I suggest them is because they deal with urban districts. And that's all they do is deal with big cities and urban districts. Now, we're probably the smallest city that's in those.
Would they be a resource to our search firm that we choose?
Yes, they list on their
No,
packet.
I'm sorry. So in other words, we do RFP, we get our search firm, we say to our search firm that we choose, oh, by the way, tap into Great City Schools.
And that could be all part of the discussion.
Because I wouldn't want to do like two things at the same time.
Right.
yeah, I mean, if you.
That could all be part of the discussion at the special meeting, because it's maybe more involved, maybe just something that we just look at and decide not to.
You said they
pursue.
gave lists of search firms.
Yeah, they do got.
I feel like that's us doing it and the RFP doing it.
No, they just got, because this was of the mind when we were still looking at two, and just the processes are different from looking at Connecticut with 169 municipalities and only like 6 or 7 of them. Every single,
What you could do,
it's like a 10-page document.
what you could do is we can have Tony get that from them, and he can review this and bring it with him when he brings the RFP to talk with us about that. And we can see how that gets integrated either into the RFP, or if it's more about they have a list that you want to be able to tap into, you can give Tony the instruction that when this gets released, let these firms in the Great City Schools list know that this is out on the street. Give them a link to BidSync so they can get the RFP. Then they take it from there.
Right.
But there's certainly nothing wrong with alerting potential proposers to the existence of this RFP
Absolutely agree.
so that they can submit. Because not everybody's registered with BidSync.
Right.
So you could do that. So you want to incorporate that into the discussion about the RFP?
Sure.
Tony?
That sounds good. But I'm not the only one that signed off on,
Well, I'm just clarifying because, a lot of this stuff, some of this stuff could have been a phone call question, where are we with AppleTrack or whatever. But we talked about all of this stuff, and it sounds like the only thing left that you want to address is the finalization of the RFP and the inclusion of the Great City Schools resources.
And public comment.
oh, right,
And public comment before it all.
right.
Is that right? Does everybody?
Oh,
My only comment to this is that it will feel like a second time during this school year, you've obstructed a way of a special meeting that's been called by board members in trying to bypass.
No,
a
I'm going to
special
hold the meeting, but I'm clarifying because we just talked about AppleTrack and the resumes, all the resumes for the interims being reviewed, and they are being compiled right now. So if all of those things had been taken care of, the only thing left is the issue related to the RFP, which Tony is this close to being ready to sit and talk with us about.
Nevertheless, I will express as a board member that there was a specific request in it that there was no need to wait for the regulated days to actually hold a special meeting, and that we could hold the meeting earlier. Instead of respecting that request, and we could have had it part of this meeting, so it could have been outlined or addressed, you ignored it, called for a special meeting on your own, and then wanted to bypass and try and hit our targets while achieving your own agenda. And so I will just express that this is the second time board members have requested a special meeting where you've ignored the request, tried to bypass it, or put it onto the regular board meeting. And I will express that the regular board meeting lasting for over 4 hours, it seemed tactical not to encourage the public to be involved in the process.
Okay.
Because if students want to comment, if family members wanted to stay, it's 11 o'clock at night. And so by us calling a special meeting, we're also trying to be respectful of everyone's time and not drag it out with other committee reports.
So we had an inordinate number of various committee special meetings that made it prohibitive to call a special meeting last go round. And I emailed Mr. Sokolovic and explained I put this on the regular meeting agenda last week. He responded that he found that to be acceptable. I presumed he was speaking for the rest of the people on the petition. Nobody responded otherwise, and so I moved forward with that. It was not tactical. I was trying to get it on an agenda within the 14-day period. That's in the past. Here, we're talking, that's in the past. Here, we're talking, and I put on this agenda the issue of the petition to get an understanding of what folks wanted to do, given that a lot of this stuff we just talked about. You wanted to know about the AppleTrack. We explained the reason why we didn't put it on AppleTrack. We just sent it to the 6093 people. We solicited all the people on the state list. All this happened the very next day. And over the past week, applications have been coming in, and the deadline is Friday, and it's all being assembled for everyone to be able to review. So I'm not going to argue.
Applications coming in if they're not through AppleTrack?
They're going directly to the HR director.
And is it posted somewhere for the HR director or for anyone that may have the 903 to reach out to the HR director, or they just have to know?
The HR director sent an email to each of the 6 holders of an 093, explaining this opportunity, and if they're interested, to please submit to her their resume. That's simple. So,
Yeah.
Colin,
But just to back up a little bit.
try not to overcomplicate this.
So yeah, I agree that everything's been addressed, but just by virtue of this special meeting being placed in front of my special meeting, one of the items dropped off, which is the interim candidate reviews, which if the board did not choose in of itself to do that, the vote went differently today. The option would have been to have that on the agenda. And if everybody was against reviewing it, they could have voted to table, postpone.
That's why I wanted to get this meeting out of the way before we got into this, because the outcome of this would have affected this.
Right.
So
what Ms. Perez, Baptiste Perez said is true, that it was strategic to put this before that, so we didn't have to deal with it.
No, this
Standalone meeting.
This meeting was called predominantly to talk about the issues of an executive search committee and what all of our understanding of it is versus working as the full board. That was the primary thing. And then this, I just needed some clarity. And, people actually asked, before we even got to this discussion about the petition, Erica asked, where are we with the interim? Where are we with Amplitrack? You asked about that. So people just kind of organically asked these questions that are already here, and they got the answers that they were looking for.
See, that's the issue though. We got the answers. Right now, the public got the answers because it's at an open meeting.
That's true.
And
That's true. That's true.
That's the whole point of my exercise. Not to embarrass anybody, get everything out in the public.
That's fine.
More transparent.
We talked about it.
Quiet I am.
And we talked about it. So now the only lingering thing is the issue related to the RFP, and we'll schedule a meeting with Tony, and we'll incorporate the materials from the great city schools, and we'll have a public comment before it all in case anybody has something they want to chime in on the RFP. Okay?
All right. And do we see any other items that need to be included that may have been overlooked that are time sensitive?
No, I mean, the only really time sensitive thing is the
Interim.
We need to be on the ball with that. So the first thing we do, I think, is to decide what day next week is everybody going to be available to review these resumes. I would say, I don't know, count on 2 hours comfortably at the most.
We're thinking about that now?
Yeah.
Okay, so
Availability to review resumes.
doing of resumes, are we going to have a tool to review them with?
What?
A rubric or
Squishy.
scoring? Do we have something to review them with? Or we just?
You could, but I think, you'll.
They're going to stand out, right? No, I don't know. I feel like we should have something, or maybe, I don't know, something that we use.
Well,
Just some type of a rubric.
But
to score,
Yeah, we
now, again, I don't want to.
So we're gonna say the review the resume in personal, or you're gonna send it online?
No, in person, physical package,
Okay.
spread them out.
And while on the subject, when we get to the interview portions after reviewing the resumes, I would like the board to be able to ask their own questions, not have a pre-selected basket of questions.
What do you mean, like, kind of?
But we got to ask the same questions to every
For every
candidate.
candidate.
Correct.
Right. Yeah, make our own.
I mean, but if we have candidates, are we going to ask 9 questions, 90 questions?
Yeah.
Well, I don't even think.
10 can't, or are we going to say, okay, we're going to see if there's 1 or 2 people who are head and shoulders, and we're going to talk to those 1 or 2 or 3 people.
Well, if there's something on their resume that stands out like a red flag, like allegations of stealing money or cheating on a test or copying someone's work, I think we should definitely point out questions.
Or weed them out.
Right, we don't-
Weed them out first.
And not be constrained to limited questions that don't allow us to ask those questions.
I'm not saying that. I'm just saying,
Yeah,
When we had the interviews with the deputy superintendent, we were there for 3.5 hours because HR gave us 8 questions to ask each of them. And so in that scenario, if you've got 10 people,
I can't imagine that we won't weed some out though, right?
well, that's what I'm saying.
Get down to
You
the.
know?
Mr. Chairman,
So my thought is that this is an initial weeding out session. Who do you want to really sit down and talk to? The people are like, absolutely not. Or, yeah, this guy's a rock star. I want to hear what he has to say.
right, and I think that's the benefit of using a score sheet, because we could have a cutoff. We'll look at everybody, say if 1 to 10, so everybody who rates 7 and over, we'll
So,
invite into an interview, and everybody under.
so what kind of criteria do you want to look for? Or do you want to just send an email and we'll have HR put together a rubric?
No, I don't want HR to do it.
Or someone, I could do it. It doesn't, it's a spreadsheet. But if you establish criteria that's important to you.
I believe we have
experience.
I think we have one.
I believe we have a rubric from, even from Dr. Johnson's hiring, if I'm not mistaken.
We have it even
There's
from-
existing rubrics.
From when Tastani was hired as acting.
Right.
That
Was there?
rubric for that.
And I remember you there. Yes, definitely, yes, because I remember we were sitting, you were sitting.
Went around the
so-
circle.
Correct.
Answer quick.
Oh, okay. All right, pull that file.
That would be good. That would keep-
I'll pull that file and
Have our questions.
we'll replicate that. And,
And
or I'll send it to everyone, and if you like it, we'll replicate it, and that'll be that. Sound like a plan? But now back to the original question.
Forgot it.
What day are you available to go through this exercise?
I'm retired. I'm good with
Me too.
I'll work around everybody's schedule.
Me too. I'm retired, so I'm okay.
Else?
But I would prefer a later meeting than earlier, though.
Not fair. Okay, next week we're talking, right?
John, I have to go.
Okay.
Thank you, guys.
Can you give us a day next week that is preferred for you?
I can't because I'm not looking at my calendar right
Okay.
now, but I'll
Get back
send it
to
by
us.
email.
Okay.
All right, thank you.
Good enough.
Well,
Mr. Macaron?
Yeah,
Any,
may I say, well, Monday is a holiday, so I don't think Monday is going to be a good day to sit down and meet. Tuesday, we have a regular board meeting,
Mhm.
so it's either Wednesday or Thursday. I'm not available Wednesday. I'm only available Thursday.
Okay.
I'm okay between Tuesday to Thursday. Friday, I cannot make it.
But we try not to meet on Friday.
I could do Thursday.
Anyone, I'm okay.
I guess I could do Thursday.
Thursday?
Anybody else?
Ms. Brown, Thursday work for you?
Yeah, Thursday should work. I know that I'm normally not available till after 6:30. So if you do it anytime before, I'll just
Do
have to-
6:30? Want to do
If it has
6:30?
to- It's up to you guys.
You could do virtual before 6:30.
Okay, well, what do you guys think? 6:30, Thursday?
Are we talking about we're talking about the interim, correct?
Yes, just to look at the resumes for interim.
And the RFP discussion.
RFP is a whole other thing. We've got to coordinate that with Tony.
So
Could we do it 6?
6?
I'm getting confused.
Yeah.
6 o'clock.
6 o'clock Thursday, review resumes for interim. Okay,
6:30,
6:30 is for you?
yes.
I'm okay 6:30 too.
6:30 as well.
Including Ms. Brown 6:30 because her job too.
Yeah.
So 6:30.
6:30
Special, right?
Thursday,
Not special. Not a special.
search committee meeting.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. I'll get
Summarize
it.
this in an
I'll get
email.
it right.
I'm the one that don't want it to be.
Settle
I'll
it.
get it
I
right.
always-
6:30 Thursday?
I always have to bend over backwards for you guys. Okay, 6:30 is fine.
Okay. Agreed?
Yep, I'm okay with that Thursday.
All right.
Number 13.
I'll send up a calendar invite. Okay. Is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll move.
Second.
In favor?
All right.
Opposed?
Aye.
Joe, I only had one.
I mean, not opposed.
Thank you for that. I had one. It was very salty.
Very salty. There's
Lauren,
no sugar in it.
when you make the vote for roll call for review resume, you say yes or no?
Was that again?
No, you did not.